Has anyone ever challenged you to something you are an expert at without them knowing it? I was at a family barbecue during the summer after my last year of college, just trying to enjoy a burger and some potato salad, when my cousin Jeff, who has always had a competitive streak the size of Texas, decided to challenge me to a game of darts. Now, Jeff didn't know that I had been a semi-pro dart player in college and had competed regionally a few times. He just assumed I was as bad as everyone else in the family, which honestly was fair because I usually played it down, throwing casually for fun rather than bragging about my ridiculously accurate aim. The table was set up in the garage, old plywood backboard cheap darts that had probably been around since the Reagan administration, but Jeff was already puffing his chest out, declaring he'd finally take down the so-called dart master of the family and that he'd post the score online as proof. The way he said it made me suspicious, but I shrugged it off. "Sure, let's play," I said, trying to act nonchalant while my fingers itched for a proper throw. He went first, tossing the dart like a cannonball, and it bounced off the board entirely. Everyone laughed, which should have been my first warning. This was going to get ridiculous fast. I gently tossed my first dart straight into the triple 20. The crowd erupted into cheers, thinking it was beginner's luck, and Jeff's face went from confident to slightly red. Round 2, he tried a fancy overhand throw he had learned from YouTube, and it somehow embedded itself in the ceiling light fixture sparks, flying for a split second. My uncle yelled something about insurance while my aunt screamed and tried to shoo everyone away from the garage. I whispered to my cousin Sarah, "This is going to be fun." By the 5th round, I was deliberately adjusting my stance and exaggerating my aim to make it look like I was struggling, scoring around 80 points when I could have hit 180 if I wanted Jeff in his delusional glory. Was bragging to the neighbors that he was about to crush me, completely unaware that my casual flicks were calculated chaos. Then things got chaotic. My cousin's dog, a hyperactive corgi named Sprinkles, decided to join the action. She darted between our legs, chasing a rogue frisbee my brother threw in excitement, and somehow knocked the board slightly crooked. Everyone panicked for a second, but I just adjusted my throw mid-spin and hit a bullseye anyway. The room went silent. You could literally hear Jeff's jaw hit the floor. Emboldened, he started pulling out ridiculous moves, leaning backward, spinning in circles, tossing darts like ninja stars. One of them narrowly missed my dad's beer and lodged itself in a window frame. Everyone gasped, thinking I was going to intervene, but I just grinned and said, "Hey, you're getting lucky." Meanwhile, I was plotting a dramatic finish that would leave him speechless. Finally, the last round came, and Jeff, sweating and muttering under his breath, aimed for a triple 19 like some mythical dart god. He missed by a mile. I could feel the adrenaline surge as I picked up my last dart. The room went quiet, tension thick like a low-budget sports movie climax. I leaned in slightly, spun the dart with exaggerated flair, and nailed a perfect 180 finish. Every eye in the garage went wide. My little cousin, who had been filming the whole thing on TikTok, screamed, "I'm uploading this." While everyone else just stared at me, mouths open, Jeff froze. He looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. "Wait, how?" He whispered, the first crack in his ego. I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Just luck, I guess." But inside, I was laughing so hard I almost cried. Sprinkles barked as if she knew she had been part of something epic. What happened next was a mix of chaos and hilarity. My uncle challenged Jeff to a rematch against me immediately, insisting it wasn't fair that the dog had interfered. Jeff's pride shattered, but Defiant agreed, and the next 20 minutes became a blur of darting limbs, flying beer cans, and people yelling warnings about the ceiling light. Somehow, I ended up winning again, barely missing a triple 19 that would have made me look like a complete show-off. Afterward, Jeff refused to speak to me for a week, sending passive-aggressive texts about rigged boards and professional cheating. Meanwhile, the TikTok video blew up, getting over 100,000 views. Comments ranging from, "This is the most chaotic thing I've ever seen," to, "Is this a professional dart tournament in disguise?" My aunt still talks about it at every family gathering, and my dad insists I owe the insurance company a small bribe just for surviving the ceiling light incident. Even now, months later, every family barbecue includes a reference to the Great Dart Incident. And Jeff gives me the side-eye whenever he sees a dartboard muttering something about next time. I still play dumb pretending I just got lucky while secretly imagining the chaos if I ever taught him a proper spinning overhand throw. He'd probably break the garage entirely. The beauty of it was how utterly unexpected it was for everyone, including Jeff. No one suspected that the quiet cousin who never brags could decimate the household's dart scene, and I loved every second of the confusion. That day became legendary, a mixture of hilarity, chaos, and the unintentional revelation that sometimes life's greatest wins happen when you let someone else think they're in control. Even the dog got a trophy in spirit, a little medal taped to her collar, because without Sprinkles' chaotic intervention, Jeff might have actually landed a triple 19. My brother still tells the story in exaggerated fashion, claiming I somehow manipulated gravity itself, and I let him, because the more chaotic the story, the more everyone believes the myth. Every time someone asks about my skills now, I smile innocently and say, "Oh, I'm decent at darts," and watch them immediately underestimate me, setting the stage for the next chaotic victory. It was a lesson in humility, pride, and the pure chaotic joy of life hacks you didn't know you were an expert at until the world forces you into the spotlight. That day, I realized that the perfect mix of casual expertise, over-the-top chaos, and a bit of luck can create stories that live in family lore for decades. I also realized after checking the garage ceiling and replacing the light fixture that maybe I should stay away from amateur physics experiments disguised as family competitions. But honestly, I wouldn't trade a single chaotic second because it cemented my place in the family's unofficial Hall of Fame. The cousin who destroyed Jeff's ego entertained everyone, and somehow turned a game of darts into an epic saga that would be remembered for generations. Even Jeff eventually laughed about it quietly under his breath in the corner while plotting his next challenge. And I, with a sly grin, silently prepared for the next round, knowing that life's chaotic hacks are the best when no one expects them, and even better when they leave the competition questioning reality itself. I was at a friend's birthday party that I didn't even want to attend. One of those cramped apartment gatherings where the music is too loud, the drinks are cheap, and everyone keeps yelling "bro" every other sentence. I was sitting on the arm of a couch trying to look busy on my phone when this guy I barely knew plopped down next to me and started bragging about how he was basically a chess god. I nodded politely, because that's what you do when someone clearly wants an audience more than a conversation. He kept going, talking about how he beats people online constantly, how his friends refuse to play him anymore, how chess is really about raw intelligence. I didn't say much, because I've learned over the years that correcting people unprompted just makes you look like an asshole. The thing is, chess has been my thing since I was a kid, not in a cool, I watched the Queen's Gambit once way, but in a, my parents put me in tournaments where everyone smelled like stress and floor cleaner way. I played competitively for over a decade, studied openings obsessively, analyzed my losses until 3 in the morning, and quietly burned out sometime in college. I don't advertise it anymore because it's not interesting at parties and it usually turns conversations weird. So when this guy leaned forward, smirking, and said, "You play chess?" I just shrugged and said, "A little." That apparently offended him on a spiritual level. He laughed and said, "Cool, because I need someone new to beat tonight." Loud enough for a few people nearby to look over. Someone dragged out an old folding chessboard from a closet, missing one pawn and with pieces that didn't quite match. A small circle formed immediately because nothing draws a crowd like someone confident enough to humiliate themselves publicly. He insisted on white and slammed the clock like he was starting a championship match. I remember thinking that I could still back out, laugh it off, say I was drunk or tired or just not in the mood. Instead, something petty and tired inside me decided to stay quiet and see how this played out. He opened with something aggressive and sloppy, the kind of opening that looks impressive if you don't know what it's doing. He kept narrating his moves, explaining his strategy to the audience like a TED Talk no one asked for. I played slowly, not to be dramatic, but because I genuinely hadn't touched a board in years and wanted to make sure my instincts were still there. After about 10 moves, I could already see how the game would end, which was both comforting and sad. He started frowning as his pieces got awkwardly boxed in, though he kept smiling for the crowd. Someone whispered, "Yo, I think she actually knows what she's doing." And I saw his jaw tighten. He started playing faster, sloppier, more emotional, which is always the beginning of the end. I sacrificed a knight that made a few people gasp, including him, who loudly said, "That's game, thanks," like he'd already won. 3 moves later, his queen was trapped in a way he didn't notice until I calmly took it. The room went quiet in that uncomfortable secondhand embarrassment way. He stared at the board for a long time, blinking like the pieces might rearrange themselves out of pity. Someone let out a low, "Oh," like we were watching a bar fight turn ugly. He accused me of setting him up, which made no sense but felt emotionally necessary for him. I didn't say anything because explaining would have sounded smug even if I meant it kindly. A few moves later, I checkmated him in a corner with a rook and a bishop, clean and unavoidable. He knocked over his king instead of tipping it like a normal human being. The silence stretched long enough that someone awkwardly changed the music. He stood up, muttered something about rust and bad board conditions, and disappeared into the kitchen. A stranger handed me a beer like I'd just survived a duel. 3 different people asked me where I learned to play, and I gave vague answers because I didn't want this to become my personality for the night. About 20 minutes later, the guy came back, noticeably drunker and way quieter. He didn't look at me directly but loudly challenged anyone else to play for real this time. No one took him up on it. Later, as the party thinned out, he cornered me near the door and asked, genuinely confused, why I hadn't said I was good. I told him I didn't think it mattered. He stared at me like that answer personally offended him more than losing did. On my walk home, I felt weirdly hollow instead of victorious. It wasn't satisfying to win, just familiar. Like slipping back into an old skin I'd outgrown. I realized I hadn't missed competition, just competence. The quiet comfort of knowing exactly what you're doing. The next day, I pulled my old chess books out of a box and flipped through them for nostalgia. I didn't start playing again seriously, but I did play a few games online for fun. Every now and then, when someone brags too loudly about being the best at something, I think about that night. Not because I crushed him, but because of how fragile confidence can be when it's built on an untested assumption. And because sometimes the most satisfying win is the one you never even planned to take. I've been playing guitar since I was 6 years old. Not in a Wonderwall at parties way, but in a grew up broke, dad taught me blues, played bars by 15, toured regionally in my 20s kind of way. It's the one thing in my life I never doubt myself on. So when I walked into a Guitar Center to buy strings and a cable, I wasn't trying to prove anything. I was wearing sweatpants, a hoodie with paint stains, and my hair was a mess because I'd just come from fixing drywall. This employee, early 20s, pristine haircut Fender Polo immediately clocked me as someone who needed help. He starts explaining string gauges like I'm 5. Then he asks if I actually play or if I'm just starting out. I laugh and say, I play a bit. He smirks and says, well, you know, once you get past beginner stuff, tone really matters. Something in me snapped, but quietly I picked up a beat-up Strat from the wall and asked if I could try it. He says sure, clearly expecting some clumsy noodling. I tuned it, sat down, and played a slow blues progression so clean and expressive that a guy from the drum section walked over. Then I slid into jazz phrasing, harmonics fingerstyle, and finally a fast controlled run that made the amp sing instead of scream. The store went silent. The employee's face went pale. Someone clapped. Someone else asked what band I was in. I handed the guitar back and said, I'll just take the strings. The employee didn't say another word. I didn't feel proud. I felt weirdly sad. Because I realized how often people assume expertise looks flashy, loud, or young, when most of the time it just looks tired and quiet. I worked in accounting for years before switching careers. Excel wasn't a skill for me, it was a second language. Pivot tables, macros, nested formulas, VBA, all of it. So when a new hire joined our department and immediately started talking about how he was an Excel wizard, I didn't care, let him have it, but then he started correcting me, publicly, loudly, incorrectly. One day during a meeting, he says, "Honestly, anyone can do this spreadsheet stuff. I could build this whole report in half the time." My boss looks at him and says, "Really?" He grins and says, "Absolutely." My boss turns to me and says, "Why don't we let you two build the same report independently?" The room goes quiet. The guy looks thrilled. We're given the same raw data. Deadline end of day. I don't rush. I clean the data properly. I structure it. I automate it. I build validation checks. I create a dashboard that updates itself. He sends his file early and keeps walking past my desk, smirking. At 4:45 p.m., I submit mine. The next morning, leadership reviews both. His report looks okay until someone changes one variable and the whole thing breaks. Mine adjusts instantly. They ask how long mine took. I say about 2 hours. He goes quiet. A month later, he was moved to a non-analytical role. 6 months later, he left the company. I never said "I told you so." I didn't need to. This happened at a house party when I was like 26, and I genuinely wasn't trying to flex or anything. I grew up playing piano because my mom was obsessed with it, and I did classical training for over a decade before burning out and never mentioning it again. I don't bring it up because it's not a cool skill at parties, and honestly, it mostly just comes with trauma and tendon pain. Anyway, someone notices the upright piano in the corner of the living room, which I hadn't even realized was there. This guy, let's call him Kevin, loudly announces that he plays a bit and sits down without asking. He does that thing where someone plays 3 chords and looks around waiting for applause. People clap politely, and Kevin laughs and says something like, "Yeah, I'm rusty, but music is like riding a bike." Then he turns to me because I was closest and goes, "Bet you can't do better." I froze because I did not want to be part of this. I tried to deflect and said I didn't really play. Kevin smirked and said, "Come on, everyone plays a little." Something about that sentence unlocked years of repressed recital rage. I sat down, cracked my fingers once, and played a Chopin nocturne I hadn't touched in years but apparently lived permanently in my spine. The room went dead quiet in that way where you can hear someone's drink ice clink. Kevin slowly backed away from the piano like it was haunted. Someone whispered, "What the fuck?" under their breath. I finished, stood up, and immediately felt embarrassed because now I was the piano person. Kevin didn't talk to me for the rest of the night and left early. I went home feeling weirdly guilty, like I'd accidentally committed a social crime. At my old office job, Excel was treated like witchcraft. People would openly say things like, "I'm just not an Excel person," while manually adding numbers with calculators. I never talked about my skills because I didn't want more work dumped on me. One day, a coworker named Brad loudly complained that I was acting smarter than everyone because I asked for raw data instead of screenshots. He challenged me in front of the team, saying, "If you're such an Excel wizard, show us." I didn't want to, but my manager looked genuinely curious. Brad handed me a completely broken spreadsheet with merged cells, random text, and dates formatted as emotions. He said, "Good luck fixing that." I asked for 5 minutes. I cleaned the data, built a pivot table, added conditional formatting, and automated the monthly report they'd been doing manually for 2 years. The room went silent in a different way. This time the, "Oh no, things are about to change," silence. My manager stared at the screen like I'd summoned a demon. Brad suddenly became very interested in his coffee. The worst part was that now everyone knew. For the next 6 months, people treated me like IT mixed with a magician. Brad never apologized but started calling Excel stupid anyway. I learned a valuable lesson about hiding power. I'm a woman, 5'0", and I don't look like I lift. I also competed in powerlifting for years before a knee injury. At my new gym, I mostly kept my head down and did rehab stuff. One day, a guy tank top Bluetooth speaker vibes of protein powder came over to correct my form. I thanked him politely and said I was fine. He insisted and told me I'd hurt myself lifting like that. Then he said, "Tell you what, let's see what you got." I was already tired and annoyed, which is dangerous. I quietly loaded plates while he smirked and explained deadlifts to me like I was a toddler. I pulled a weight he had not touched all day. Clean, controlled, no drama. The guy stopped talking mid-sentence. He stared at the bar like it betrayed him personally. A trainer across the room raised his eyebrows and nodded at me. The gym bro mumbled something about warming up and walked away for weeks afterward. He avoided eye contact like I was an ex. I felt bad for about 3 seconds, then went back to my music.